fact, from Bonnie Loradine, saying people who think the president controls the government and laws that are passed lack fundamental understanding, I suppose, of the way the American system works, Chloe.
That's true. I mean, there is so much control he has, but then there's a lot of control that individual states have, and we found that a lot. We visited the last abortion clinic in Missouri, in St. Louis, and so abortion is something the president has come out and said he is pro-choice, but states can limit what the law states. So there's, a federal law that says abortion is legal in America. But in Missouri, what they've done is state laws have regulated the size of the rooms of abortion clinics and the corridors, and it means that, in effect, all the abortion clinics have closed down, save one. And so for some women who are right on the other side of the state and can't afford to travel all those hundreds of miles to get to this one clinic, it might as well be illegal for them. So states can really, really challenge the laws that the president brings about on a federal level.
Also, I suppose Congress can, and that's more comments that we've had. Mike Horsley said when the opposing party states before he even takes office they're going to oppose him on everything, even issues they support. It's not Obama doing the polarising. And I think that referred to, I remember Mitch McConnell, the Senate Majority Leader, said, my top priority is let's make this a one-term president. Also, we have to say, getting comments in that are critical of the president and what he's done. One that you've just sent us here on our Facebook Live from Mike Pulsiver. He's polarised this country more by playing groups of people against each other and shredding the Constitution while doing what he can to rule like Caesar. I mean, people are very, very proud of the Constitution. It really matters, doesn't it, on many issues?
It does. And I think Obama, especially now, actually, you see as he's leaving office, he's suddenly making one final push to pass through laws on subjects that are clearly dear to him and that he's felt he hasn't had the energy and power to do before. We were in Nashville, Tennessee, looking at the prison system, and America has an absolutely enormous prison system. It has 25% of the world's prisoners, and it has something like 5% of the world's population. So it's
That's
absolutely
quite a stat, isn't it?
It's huge. And one of the issues that they have is that they've employed private prison providers in prisons to provide this service to the state. But these private prison providers aren't required to show that recidivism rates are coming down. They just need to prove that they're housing prisoners at a cheaper rate than the state does. And actually, when you look at the fact that it's a private company, it doesn't seem to be in their interest to prevent people coming back and rehabilitate them. It seems to be in their interest to keep them there so that they can make money off them. Well, there have been reviews of the private prison system and that have been highly critical and say that conditions are far more violent, far worse, more overcrowding, worse food and worse recidivism rates. And so Obama just last month passed a law saying that federal prisons will end private contractors. But that's not going to happen on a state level. That will be decided on a state-by-state level. So although federal prisons may stop private prison providers providing that service, state governments can make their own minds up what they do. So there is this two-tiered system. It's almost like the European Union. Individual states really have their own governments that have quite a lot of control.
So it does matter as well which state you're in, because there could be different rules in different states. We want to know if you're sending us comments from America, which states you're in. That'll help. Just to say, I'm looking down because quite a lot of comments have suddenly come in on our Facebook Live. M. Rezul saying hello. Well, hello to you too. Chuck has got in touch. He's very critical of Hillary Clinton. Says the Democrats are afraid of losing the minority vote, and this issue of minorities, majority is obviously big. Carlo says he'd like those fries. I'm going to eat one for you, Carlo. People are getting in touch from India and Pakistan. A lot of people now getting in touch here on Facebook. And just to say, send in your questions. I'm Philippa Thomas, eating the fries. This is Chloe Hadramatheu, and we're talking about how America has changed over the Obama years. I just wanted to pick up on something about hostility towards Hillary Clinton, and what I found was really interesting. I was meeting Democrats I met in 2008 who held so much hope for the Obama presidency. Staunch Democrats, people who'd been Democrats all their lives. Denise Segrest in Memphis, a black single mother housing councillor who's really felt the force of the financial crisis. She was a housing councillor advising people who were about to be foreclosed on, and then she suddenly risked losing her own house to foreclosure. So she really felt that the banks
were getting a great deal and that the public was being sold out on. Now she's looking to elect a new president, and she says she won't vote because she doesn't like Hillary Clinton. I was quite surprised that somebody who'd been a Democrat all her life and was so passionately a Democrat just said, I won't vote. I'd rather not vote than vote for Hillary Clinton. I don't trust her.
Lack of trust and distrust of the politicians, the people at the top, I think was a really big thing we both found. Quite a few people now coming up and saying making comments that are critical of President Obama. And there's a question, does that reflect what we both found? I'll kind of say, from my point of view, yes and no, because some people are very critical, still talking about having lost their house, having no job, health insurance. Yeah, there are reforms, but then they don't work for everybody. Other people said to me, look at what he came into. The recession, which kind of hit 2007, 2008, required massive spending programs to keep the auto industry going, to kind of bring America back. I heard some people say, Obama wasn't given credit for what he did. One woman, Linda, in Truth or Consequences, New Mexico, said to me he got handed a great pile of poo and had to deal with it. So, that's a fairly obvious comment. You know what she thinks about that. Actually, then this is interesting. This is exactly what we've been talking about. Dave has just messaged to say, has the US economic recovery passed some people by? And he's talking about pockets of deprivation in Detroit. And Dave, I think that's a really good question, because we've both found that, yes, that's the answer. Some people have been passed by, haven't they?
I think they really have been. I'll go back to Denisa Segres, this lady in Memphis who was, when I met her in 2008, the financial crisis had just hit. Lehman Brothers had just gone bust, and she was suddenly facing foreclosure. And it was very, very sad, actually. Her interest rates had gone up, and her bills had gone up by $200 a month, and that was just too much for her. And she was really, really struggling. Well, she's a housing counsellor, and when I met her, she kept her home, but she said the reason was that she knew how to play the system because she was a housing counsellor, and she watched loads of people who just couldn't understand the small print of their mortgage and didn't know how to play the system and hadn't held on to their houses. And although in a sense she beat the system because she'd managed to play the mortgage company in the bank and keep her home, she knows that she's never going to own it. She will be beholden to the mortgage company for the rest of her life.
That is such a huge theme, which I found travelling across the west of America as well. The idea in America, you work hard, keep your head down, you will own your own home, and you'll have a home for your family. Well, so many people lost their homes, or the values of their homes just, slumped during the recession in 2007 and 8. When I was in Las Vegas, I talked to Mike Peevler, an estate agent there, real estate agent, and he was saying he had sat in so many rooms with people where everybody, even he, was crying because they'd basically worked for years to get a house, and now they were losing it. And he said to me, a lot of people now who might have assumed 10 years ago they're going to own a home eventually will rent for the rest of their lives. And that is a shattering of the American dream. And I think Chloe and I both found the recession happened 8 years ago, and technically it's over. The ripples are still spreading out. And any comments from you about that, I'd really like to hear, because it's certainly what we've been hearing.
Definitely. I mean, I met a lady just outside a budget supermarket in small town Missouri who said that, I have to say, when I met her, I thought she must be in her mid to late 40s. She was actually in her 20s. Her teeth were black, her face was haggard. She looked like somebody who'd really struggled with life. And she was telling me that her and her 3 children and husband were all on food stamps. Her husband worked 6 days a week, 11 hours a day in a nail factory, and they still weren't sure they could make the rent every month. And I said to her, people tell you that in America, if you work hard and you do the right thing, you can make it. And she said, well, that's just a lie. That's just a lie. People like me can't. Unless I win the lottery, nothing's going to change in my life. It was a really kind of stark, sad story to hear that she, just at the age of 24, really didn't have any hope that life would get any easier.
I'm just going to remind you where we are. This is Philippa Thomas and Chloe Hadjimatheou, and we are in the diner in Soho. We've been allowed to leave the newsroom. We're in London, so we've got an American theme here because we're talking to you and asking for your thoughts about how America has changed during the Obama years. So this is a BBC World Service Facebook stream, and we've got about 10 minutes more to go. A few more comments coming in, Chloe. Just to say, Enger has got in touch to say Obama's made Africans proud, and he says, did anyone you met talk about foreign policy? I have to say the answer was not very much for me, because when you talk to people about the issues that affect them most, it does tend to be, have they got a job, have they got a home, have they got health care? There is a lot of talk about national security, and that has led to distrust of foreigners in some places. I definitely found that.
I did, but I also spoke to black people in America. I spoke to a man called Rex Rattler, who owns a small grocery store in Missouri, who said, you know, just the fact that we had a black president makes me feel that things are possible in this country. He also felt that there was still racial discrimination and that he'd suffered from that. But I think he felt that there was a sense of hope that came with seeing a black man take such a position of power and do it with such dignity. He was very proud. His grocery store was covered in Obama pictures. And he said, you know, he thinks that he wasn't a black president in the sense that he didn't just focus on black issues. But for a man who was, you know, a small town businessman in America, it had really meant a lot to him to see a black man in the White House.
Another comment as well from Katya saying America is still a way better place than any other. And even though we're telling you about a lot of the criticisms we heard, we did both find that real sense of pride, I think, in America and in its ideals. And I suppose political divisions are over what American ideals are all about as well, aren't they?
I agree. I think people are really proud, and I think that's where they struggle, is when they feel that the country is falling short of the ideals that they feel America stands for, definitely. Yes.
We also, at the end of my trip before Chloe picked up, I was in El Paso, Texas, on the Mexican border. And the big issue there, of course, was the wall. Donald Trump wants to build a higher wall, a bigger wall, and the wall is really being built up. We saw that when we were there. But there's also the question of how many people do you let in, and what do you do with illegal migrants who've got in already? Should they be given an amnesty? Should they be sent back? And a lot of people have very strong views on that. I mean, quite a few people said we need to send back illegal migrants.
Yes, and actually in the third leg of the documentary, which was presented by Michelle Fleury and Ben Crichton produced, they went to New York and they spoke to a young Muslim blogger in New York who felt that actually the country had become more and more hostile to her. She didn't feel that there was any division. Actually, Michelle asked her, do you feel more Muslim or more American? And she said, well, I just think that's a spurious question. Why can't I be both? One doesn't exclude the other. And she felt actually that Muslim values and American values, that there was a hell of a lot of overlap. She felt that actually more than any other religion, the Muslim religion and held up the same kind of ideals as her national ideals.
I heard that as well from Kirsty Saba in just outside Phoenix in Arizona. And she had, it was a really sweet interview, that she has 3 little girls and they're all sitting on the steps. Their mum was helped to set up a Muslim Girl Scout troop. And the idea was, even though the mum wears a headscarf, the little girls don't yet, they wanted to go out, talk to the neighbours and be seen to be Muslim and American. And Girl Scout cookies, selling Girl Scout cookies is about as American as you get. I'm just going to remind you why I keep looking up and down. I'm not being badly behaved, honestly. I'm looking at your questions. The last one that's just come up, Ward says the anti-Clinton propaganda, we've heard a lot about Hillary Clinton and hostility, he believes is based on misogyny. So is it partly because she's a woman? We both certainly heard a lot of very direct statements about, I wouldn't vote for Hillary Clinton, I'd leave the country if she got elected, that kind of thing. We both heard that.
I think it's, I mean, that I didn't hear that directly, I have to say.
Yeah.
I didn't hear that, that because she's a woman I wouldn't vote for her. I had a feeling that Hillary has too much baggage and that people were put off by the fact that she's actually maybe too experienced. She's been around for a very long time and there's a lot of baggage there, and I felt that people, there's this idea that the political establishment is not to be trusted. The people in power, the politicians, are in it for themselves, and that Hillary Clinton is very much part of this elite. And I think that that's something that Donald Trump's popularity has really played on. The people that have been supporting Donald Trump love the fact that he seems to be an outsider to politics, and Hillary Clinton really is the total opposite to that, and that has been to her detriment to a large extent, I think.
One of the points that came in just before we went up live on Facebook from Paul Kennington saying he talked about a wider racial divide, more dissatisfaction with government, lower confidence in politicians' promises, if that was even possible, and an overall sense of being misled or lied to. And I think your point about the baggage that Hillary Clinton brings, and the Clintons have kind of been involved in politics for decades and decades. A lot of people want a fresh start. On the other hand, I don't know the answers to this. Obama was a fresh start, and we've also seen some disillusion there. So tough one.
That's true. It is tough. But we did hear from people again in the third chapter in states that have really been struggling, like West Virginia, a mining state which has really been decimated. The mining industry has really, really scaled back, and hundreds and hundreds of people have lost their jobs recently, and there's extreme poverty in West Virginia. Food banks have been overwhelmed, and Michelle Fleury spoke to somebody there and said, will you be voting? Can there political change help? Could a new president help you? And he said, if politics changed anything, they would have made it illegal ages ago. I'm not even going to vote, he said. The real change has to happen on a grassroots level. People in states taking action and doing things for themselves. And I think there is a sense in America of this kind of grassroots level of people in states taking matters into their own hands and not expecting something from the politicians on high.
Getting a lot of comments coming through. We're into our last few minutes, so I'm just going to remind you, do send us your comments or questions if you're interested. I'm Philippa Thomas, this is Chloe Hadjimatheo, and we're talking about America, the United States, and how it's changed in the Obama years. We've both been across the States on road trips over the summer, talking to people about that. Just a few points here. Actually, people getting in touch from Brazil as well now. John Joseph says America started to decline under Reagan. So, I mean, you're right, John. It's not just a kind of theme of the last few years, this sense of decline and political alienation. I've covered it a lot. Kent says that under Obama, America is becoming a third world country. Darren's saying America's left in a big mess because of Obama. I mean, a bit of kind of despair coming through there. And some of the comments that we heard on the road were from people struggling, and often struggling with the basic things like getting and keeping jobs as well, I suppose. And Michelle heard that too.
There was that. And in fact, we spoke to people in Nashville, Tennessee. We spoke to a black man in Nashville, Tennessee that had come out of prison after 26 years, and another prisoner who'd been inside for 7 years. And both of them were telling us that the story that it was a generational thing, that generations and generations of their families had been in prison and had turned to crime because of poverty. It was an incredibly sad story. One man who's come out after 7 years of being in prison and really turned his life around and worked so hard says that he was a victim of his father was a victim of his grandfather, and now he was really frightened that his son was going to follow suit. His son, despite the fact that this man had come out of prison and worked hard was getting a college degree and was doing everything he could to become an upstanding member of society, said his son wasn't asking him about college. He thought that the fact that his father had been to prison was cool, and there wasn't much he could do about it. And he said, I'm afraid my son is going to go the same way. And so there was this sense of a kind of, tens and tens of years and decades of generations of families going down the same road, and there not being anything for them to latch onto to get out of this pattern. And I think there is a sense in America that if you fall through the cracks, there isn't very much there left to rescue you. If you go through the cracks, then really life can be pretty awful in America.
And we both heard, whilst we're in the States, and I've heard this quite a lot in the last 4 years, inequality, the way that the very rich have got even richer. But a lot of middle-class Americans feel they might even be falling out of that bracket, or, falling into more insecurity. That sense that in the land of opportunity, the gulf is growing and it's getting tougher for the masses. That's led to Occupy. It led to a lot of support for Bernie Sanders, which I found crossing my part of the West. What he was saying resonated because, those very basic things like equality and opportunity. People really want to talk about that.
It was really interesting, actually, in this small Republican town in Missouri, Poplar Bluff. We were speaking to young people who said, school is available for you. If you work hard and you study hard, you can make a better life for yourself. And then we spoke to a single mum who was a waitress where we'd gone for lunch, and she talked about her 3 children. And she said, we live just below the poverty line. We're on food stamps. I work as a waitress. We can't make ends meet. And the school requires our children to do their homework on the internet. Well, we can't afford internet, she said. We just don't have the money to have Wi-Fi at home. And therefore, we end up going to parking lots every evening, sitting in the dark of a car, trying to, for the kids to try and do their homework off the free Wi-Fi from McDonald's or from, a strip mall. And she said, what about the children whose mum isn't prepared to do that for them? Well, actually, it's almost impossible for them to get anywhere through the school system. So it's not as simple as people just trying hard and working hard and being able to better their situation. It's a bit more complex than that.
I have to say, Chloe, that I started reporting from America back in 1997, shows her age. And something that always strikes me is how hard Americans work, especially to try to get their kids what they need. And so many Americans have 2 jobs, 3 jobs, as many gigs as they can get. And they do things like that, sitting in the car park so their kids can get on Wi-Fi to finish homework. I mean, people are there is that real work ethic still. Just to tell you that on our Facebook Live about America and how it's changed in the Obama years, we're going to be wrapping up soon. If you're dying to get a comment in, type it into your Facebook now, wherever you are. I do want to finish with a positive thought, because we've heard a lot of troubles and challenges, but we've also been talking just now, Chloe and I, about what we heard that was positive. And for me, in a way, it was sitting in Truth or Consequences, New Mexico, this small spa town, with a group of people around a table talking about Obamacare, healthcare. And I know this is highly controversial and not everybody does well out of it, and some people think the state shouldn't pay for it. But I talked to a couple of 20-somethings who said, we would probably be bankrupt now. William had to have surgery on his leg that would have cost tens of thousands of dollars. He would be bankrupt at the start of his working life if he hadn't had Obamacare. And I did hear quite a few stories about the people who now have health insurance for the first time in their lives.
Well, I also heard a positive story about something completely different. I went back and visited again Reverend Hudson, who was a gay minister in Dallas, Texas. You wouldn't think it, but Dallas, Texas has the biggest LGBTQ church in the world. You wouldn't think that possibly of a state that's quite conservative. But Reverend Hudson had finally succeeded in marrying her girlfriend, her long-term partner, and it was something that meant a hell of a lot to both of them, and they were clearly really in love and just absolutely overwhelmed with joy at the fact that they had managed to formalise this love in a marriage. So they were absolutely gushing with praise for President Obama.
So just before Chloe and I get to eat our burgers, we are going to sign off by reminding you that our road trip and the stories from our road trip and Michelle Fleury's are now available as a podcast on the BBC World Service. So online, you go to BBC World Service /Inside America, and those episodes are available for you to upload, to listen to. You can talk to us both on Twitter. You're Chloe Hodge.
At Chloe Hodge.
And I'm at Philippa BBC. You can talk to us on our Facebook pages, obviously. And we want to thank you for all the comments. Those of you who've messaged us from not just in America, but around the world, Brazil, India, Pakistan, beyond. Thank you very much. And thanks for being with us.